I don't trust black pilots flying this aircraft. The words sliced through the first-class cabin of American Eagle Flight 447 like a blade through silk. Victoria Ashford didn't whisper them. She didn't mumble them under her breath. She delivered them with the cold, calculated arrogance of a woman who had never faced real consequences for anything in her 45 years of privileged existence. Every conversation in the cabin stopped. Every head turned. The soft hum of the air conditioning suddenly seemed deafening. Victoria sat in seat 1A, her perfectly manicured fingers drumming against the armrest of her leather seat. Her blonde hair was styled in an elegant bob that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. She wore a tailored Chanel suit in navy blue with diamond earrings that caught the morning light streaming through the small windows. Everything about her screamed money power and entitlement. She had no idea that in exactly 3 hours, at 30,000 feet above the Colorado Rockies, the very hands she refused to trust would be the only thing standing between her and a fiery death. But first, let me ask you something. Where are you watching this from? Drop your city in the comments below. And if you believe that respect should be given based on character, not color, hit that subscribe button. Because what you're about to witness is a masterclass in how prejudice can destroy a life in less time than it takes to fly from Miami to Denver. Victoria's statement hung in the air like toxic smoke. Isabella Rodriguez, the lead flight attendant, stood frozen in the galley. Isabella was 38 with kind eyes and 20 years of experience dealing with difficult passengers. But this was different. "Excuse me, ma'am?" Isabella asked, stepping closer to Victoria's seat. Her voice was steady professional, but there was steel underneath. "What did you just say?" Victoria turned her head slowly like a queen acknowledging a servant. "You heard me perfectly well. I said I don't trust black pilots. I want to know who's flying this plane, and I want to speak to someone in authority, not you." The passengers in the surrounding seats sat in stunned silence. In 2B, Jake Morrison, a 28-year-old tech entrepreneur from Silicon Valley, slowly reached for his phone. His fingers moved quickly across the screen, opening his live stream app. "This is unbelievable," he whispered to his camera. "I'm on American Eagle Flight 447, and a passenger just made the most racist statement I've ever heard in person." Victoria's voice rose higher. "I pay for first class because I expect first-class service. That includes competent pilots. I've read the statistics about diversity hiring in aviation. I know what's happening. They're lowering standards to fill quotas. Doctor." Sarah Martinez, a 35-year-old pediatric surgeon sitting across the aisle, set down her medical journal. She had been planning to use the flight time to review case studies, but this demanded her attention. "Ma'am," Dr. Martinez said firmly, "I'm a surgeon. I've worked with colleagues of every background, and I can tell you that competence has nothing to do with race. You're out of line." Victoria's laugh was sharp and bitter. "A surgeon. How nice. But when we're 30,000 feet in the air, your medical degree won't help us if the pilot makes a mistake. I want assurance that this aircraft is being flown by someone qualified." Isabella's hand moved to the intercom button. "Ma'am, I need you to lower your voice. You're disturbing other passengers." "Disturbing them with facts," Victoria shot back. "I'm a successful businesswoman. I didn't get where I am by being naive about diversity politics. I know how these airline companies operate now." Jake's live stream had already attracted over 5,000 viewers. The chat was exploding with outraged comments. #PrivilegedPassenger was beginning to trend on Twitter. In the cockpit, Captain Marcus Rivera was running through his final pre-flight checks. Marcus was 32 years old, with the bearing of a man who had seen combat and survived. He had served 2 tours in Afghanistan, flying dangerous missions over hostile territory. His transition to commercial aviation had been seamless. He was considered one of the most skilled pilots in the American Eagle fleet. Marcus heard the commotion through the partially open cockpit door. His co-pilot, First Officer David Chen— Wait, I need to change this name as instructed. His co-pilot, First Officer David Walsh, A 50-year-old veteran with silver hair frowned at the noise. "Dave, you hearing this?" Marcus asked quietly. David nodded grimly. "Unfortunately, yes." "Want me to call security?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. He had faced discrimination before. Subtle comments, questioning looks, assumptions about how he got his position. But rarely was it this blatant, this public. "Not yet," Marcus said. "Let's see how this plays out." Back in the cabin, Victoria was just getting started. She stood up from her seat, her 5'8" frame imposing in the narrow aisle. "I want to speak to the gate agent. Now. I want confirmation about who is flying this aircraft, and I want alternatives." Isabella kept her voice level. "Ma'am, our captain is highly qualified. Captain Rivera is a military veteran with an exceptional safety record." Rivera. Victoria's eyebrows shot up. "So, not only is he black, he's Hispanic too." This gets better and better. What's next? Are we going to have a diversity hire mechanic? Tell me the engines are probably fine. The gasp that went through the cabin was audible. Jake's viewer count hit 10,000. Someone in economy had started recording too. Multiple angles of Victoria's meltdown were being captured in real time. Dr. Martinez stood up. "Ma'am, I'm going to say this once, and I want you to listen carefully. You are being a racist, entitled individual, and everyone on this plane can see it. You're embarrassing yourself." Victoria whipped around to face her. "Entitled? I pay for first class. I pay taxes that probably fund whatever diversity program got that pilot his job. I have every right to express concern for my safety." "Your safety isn't threatened by the pilot's race," Dr. Martinez replied coolly. "It's threatened by your ignorance." Isabella pressed the call button for the gate agent. "This is Flight 447. We need assistance in the first-class cabin." Victoria smiled triumphantly. "Good. Finally, someone with authority." The gate agent, Ashley Williams, appeared within minutes. Ashley was 29, blonde, and looked like she could handle herself in any situation. She had dealt with difficult passengers before, but the reports she was getting over her radio suggested this was extraordinary. "Ma'am, I understand you have concerns about the flight crew," Ashley said diplomatically. "Concerns?" Victoria laughed. "I have a legitimate question about pilot qualifications. I want to know about Captain Rivera's training, his experience, and whether there are other options for this flight." Ashley's expression remained neutral. "Ma'am, all our pilots meet the highest FAA standards. Captain Rivera is one of our most experienced pilots." "I don't care about your standards," Victoria snapped. "I care about reality. The reality is that airlines are under pressure to hire minorities, and that pressure leads to corners being cut. I'm not willing to risk my life for political correctness." The entire first-class section was now recording. Jake's live stream had reached 15,000 viewers. The hashtag racist Victoria was starting to trend alongside hashtag privileged passenger. Ashley tried a different approach. "Ma'am, if you're uncomfortable flying with us today, we'd be happy to book you on a later flight." "No," Victoria said firmly. "I have an important business meeting in Denver. I'm not changing my schedule because your airline has questionable hiring practices. I want a different pilot." Marcus had heard enough. He unbuckled his harness and stood up in the cockpit. David looked at him with concern. "Marcus, don't give her the satisfaction." Marcus shook his head. "Dave, sometimes you have to face ignorance head on. Otherwise it just grows." He straightened his captain's uniform, adjusted his tie, and walked toward the cabin. The moment he appeared in the doorway between the cockpit and first class, the entire section fell silent. Marcus was a striking figure. Tall, broad-shouldered, with intelligent eyes and a calm demeanor that commanded respect. His military bearing was evident in every step he took. His uniform was immaculate, his captain's wings gleaming on his chest. Victoria turned to face him, and for a moment uncertainty flickered across her features. But her arrogance quickly reasserted itself. "You must be Captain Rivera," she said, looking him up and down as if he were an object for inspection. "I am Marcus," replied evenly. "And you must be the passenger with concerns about my qualifications." "I do have concerns," Victoria said, lifting her chin defiantly. "I think I have a right to know about the experience level of the person flying this aircraft." Marcus nodded slowly. "Of course you do. I'm happy to address your concerns." The cabin was dead silent. Every passenger was watching. Jake's live stream viewer count hit 20,000. I graduated from the United States Air Force Academy. Marcus began, his voice calm and clear. "I served 8 years as an Air Force pilot flying F-16 Fighting Falcons in combat missions over Afghanistan and Iraq. I logged over 2,000 hours in military aircraft before transitioning to commercial aviation 6 years ago." Victoria's expression didn't change. "That's very nice. But military flying is different from commercial flying." "You're absolutely right," Marcus agreed. "Commercial aviation requires different skills, which is why I completed 18 months of intensive commercial pilot training, passed every FAA examination with distinction, and have logged over 5,000 hours flying commercial aircraft without a single safety incident." Dr. Martinez began to clap slowly. Other passengers joined in. The applause grew until the entire first-class section was applauding Marcus. Victoria's face flushed red. "Statistics can be manipulated. I still want assurance that this flight will be safe." Marcus looked at her for a long moment. "Ma'am, I understand your concerns. Flying can be anxiety-provoking for anyone. If you're not comfortable with me as your captain, you're absolutely free to take a different flight. I told your gate agent already I'm not changing my schedule. I want a different pilot." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus studied Victoria's face, seeing the entitlement, the prejudice, the absolute certainty that she could get what she wanted through sheer force of will. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "I am the captain of this aircraft. I am highly qualified, extensively trained, and completely committed to the safety of every person on board, including you. The choice is yours. Fly with me or find another flight." Victoria stared at him, her jaw set. She glanced around the cabin, seeing the hostile faces of the other passengers, the phones recording her every word, the complete lack of support for her position. But Victoria Ashford had never backed down from anything in her life. "Fine," she said coldly. "I'll stay. But if anything goes wrong, anything at all, I'm holding this airline responsible." Marcus nodded professionally. "Nothing will go wrong, ma'am. I guarantee it." As he turned to walk back to the cockpit, Victoria called out one more time. "Captain Rivera, I hope you're right, because if you're not, we're all going to pay the price for your airline's political correctness." Marcus paused at the cockpit door and looked back at her. "Ma'am, the only thing political about this conversation is your assumption that my race has anything to do with my ability to do my job." He disappeared into the cockpit, leaving Victoria alone in a sea of hostile stares. Jake's live stream had reached 30,000 viewers. The story was already being picked up by news outlets. And in exactly 2 hours and 43 minutes, Victoria Ashford would understand exactly how wrong she had been about everything. The boarding door closed with a sharp click that seemed to echo through the cabin like a gunshot. Victoria Ashford settled into her first-class seat, apparently satisfied that she had made her point. She pulled out her tablet and began scrolling through emails, acting as if the confrontation had never happened. But the rest of the aircraft was buzzing with electric tension. Jake Morrison's live stream had exploded to 50,000 viewers in just 20 minutes. The chat was moving so fast he couldn't read individual comments, but the sentiment was clear. People were outraged by Victoria's behavior and inspired by Captain Rivera's dignified response. "Guys, this is insane," Jake whispered into his phone camera. "I've never seen anything like this." This woman just publicly questioned a pilot's qualifications based purely on his race, and he handled it like an absolute professional. The hashtag Victoria Ashford had begun trending nationwide, but not in the way Victoria would have wanted. Social media users were digging into her background, finding photos from her LinkedIn profile identifying her company. The internet's collective detective work was swift and merciless. Dr. Martinez was furiously typing on her phone. "This woman runs Ashford Capital Management," she announced to the passengers around her. "She manages over $200 million in investments, and she just publicly displayed the kind of prejudice that should disqualify her from any leadership position." In Seat 3, a Margaret Thompson, a 60-year-old retired teacher from Ohio, shook her head in disgust. "I've seen a lot of things in my 70 years, but the audacity of that woman is breathtaking." "It's worse than audacity," said Robert Kim, a corporate lawyer in 2F. "It's actionable discrimination. If I were Captain Rivera, I'd be talking to an employment attorney the moment we land." Victoria looked up from her tablet, irritated by the continued conversation around her. "Are you all going to talk about me for the entire flight? Because I'd prefer some peace and quiet." "Actually, yes," Dr. Martinez said firmly. "We're going to talk about what you did because it was wrong, and it's important that everyone understands why it was wrong. I exercised my rights as a paying customer." Victoria shot back. "I asked legitimate questions about safety." Jake turned his camera toward Victoria, making sure to get her face clearly in frame. "Ma'am, 50,000 people are watching this live stream right now. Do you want to clarify your position for them?" Victoria's eyes flashed with anger. "Turn that camera off right now, or I'll have you arrested for harassment." "Actually," Robert Kim interjected, "recording in a public space is completely legal, and an aircraft cabin is considered a public space." "This is first class," Victoria snapped. "Not a public space. Still legal," Robert replied. "Freedom of speech goes both ways. You exercised yours, now everyone else gets to exercise theirs." Jake's phone was pinging constantly with notifications. Major news outlets were reaching out for interviews. The video clips of Victoria's confrontation with Captain Rivera had been shared thousands of times across all social media platforms. "This is going viral in real time," Jake announced to his audience. CNN, Fox News, MSNBC. They're all picking this up. This is going to be everywhere within the hour. In the cockpit, Captain Rivera was going through his final pre-flight checklist with methodical precision. His co-pilot, David Walsh, kept glancing at him with concern. "Marcus, how are you holding up?" "That was rough back there." Marcus's hands moved steadily across the instrument panel, checking every gauge, every indicator. "I've dealt with worse, Dave. Way worse." "Still, that was pretty blatant." "You want to talk to Union Rep when we land?" Marcus considered this. "Maybe, but right now I'm focused on getting these people safely to Denver, including her." David shook his head in amazement. "Your professionalism is incredible, man. I don't know if I could be that cool under pressure." "Afghanistan teaches you to stay focused on what matters," Marcus replied. "Right now what matters is this flight." But even as he spoke, Marcus could feel the weight of what had just happened. It wasn't the first time he'd faced discrimination, but it was certainly the most public. He thought about his father, who had worked for 30 years as an aircraft mechanic and had faced similar prejudice. His father had always told him, "Son, let your work speak louder than their ignorance." Back in the cabin, the social media storm was intensifying by the minute. Passengers throughout the aircraft had heard about the incident and were adding their voices to the online conversation. Ashley Williams. The gate agent was still on board, handling the final boarding procedures. She approached Victoria one more time. "Ma'am, I want to give you one final opportunity to deplane. Once we push back from the gate, you're committed to this flight with this crew." Victoria didn't even look up from her tablet. "I'm staying, and I'm keeping a record of everything that happens on this flight." Ashley nodded and keyed her radio. "Ground control, American 447. We're ready for pushback." The aircraft began to move slowly away from the gate. Victoria felt a moment of unease, but pushed it aside. She was Victoria Ashford. She had built a $200 million investment firm from scratch. She didn't back down from anyone. Jake was providing live commentary to his audience, which had now grown to 75,000 viewers. "We're pushing back from the gate now, and the woman who made the racist comments is still on board. This is incredible. She had multiple chances to leave, but she's choosing to stay on a flight with the pilot she just publicly disrespected." The aircraft rolled toward the runway as Captain Rivera's voice came over the intercom system. His tone was professional, warm, and completely composed. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Welcome aboard American Eagle Flight 447 with service to Denver International Airport. We're currently number 3 for takeoff, so we should be airborne in about 10 minutes. Victoria listened to his voice, clear, confident, authoritative, and felt a flicker of doubt, but she pushed it away. "Our flight time today will be approximately 3 hours and 15 minutes. We'll be cruising at 37,000 feet, and the weather looks good most of the way. We may encounter some light turbulence over the Colorado Rockies, but nothing out of the ordinary." Marcus paused, and when he continued, there was something different in his tone, something personal. "I want to take a moment to address something that happened during boarding. A passenger questioned my qualifications to fly this aircraft. I want everyone on board to know that I take your safety seriously. It's my highest priority always." The cabin was completely silent now. Every passenger was listening intently. "I've been flying for 14 years, 8 in the military and 6 in commercial aviation. I've completed every training requirement, passed every examination, and logged thousands of hours without incident. But most importantly, I have 16 souls in first class, 94 souls in the main cabin, and 5 crew members counting on me to get them home safely today. That's a responsibility I've never taken lightly, and I never will." Dr. Martinez felt tears spring to her eyes. The dignity in his voice, the professionalism despite what he had just endured. It was extraordinary. "So regardless of any personal opinions about me or my qualifications, I want everyone to know that you're in safe hands. I'll get you to Denver safely, professionally, and on time." Marcus clicked off the intercom. In the cabin, the silence stretched for several seconds before spontaneous applause broke out. It started in economy class and swept forward through the entire aircraft. Passengers were standing, clapping, some even cheering. Victoria sat rigid in her seat, not clapping, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. Jake's live stream exploded with comments. "This pilot is incredible. What a class act. That woman should be ashamed of herself. Captain Rivera for president." The hashtag Captain Rivera was now trending alongside hashtag Victoria Ashford, but the sentiment was completely different. People were sharing stories of their own experiences with discrimination, praising Marcus's professionalism, and calling for Victoria to face consequences for her behavior. Margaret Thompson leaned across the aisle toward Victoria. "Young lady, you should be ashamed of yourself. That man just showed more class in 2 minutes than you've shown in your entire life." Victoria finally snapped. "Mind your own business, you old bat. I don't need lectures from someone flying coach." "I'm in first class just like you," Margaret replied evenly. "The difference is that I earned my seat through respect, not inheritance." Jake's camera captured the entire exchange. His viewer count hit 100,000. "Did she just call an elderly woman an old bat?" Jake said into his camera. "This woman's true character is really showing now." Victoria stood up abruptly. "I want all cameras turned off now. This is harassment, and I won't stand for it." Isabella Rodriguez approached calmly. "Ma'am, I need you to take your seat. We're about to take off. Not until these people stop filming me." "Ma'am, they have every right to film. You made your statements publicly. You can't control the consequences." Victoria looked around the cabin wildly. Every face was hostile. Every phone was pointed at her. The weight of what she had unleashed was finally starting to sink in. Her own phone was buzzing constantly. Calls from her office, from her board members, from reporters. The Ashford Capital Management website was crashing under the traffic load from people trying to learn more about the company's leadership. Robert Kim was scrolling through financial websites. "Your company's stock is down 18% in after-hours trading," he announced. "This is turning into a real financial disaster for you." Victoria's face went pale. "That's impossible. The market's not even open." "After-hours trading," Robert explained. "Investors are spooked. When the CEO of an investment firm shows this level of poor judgment publicly, it raises questions about her decision-making abilities across the board." For the first time since the confrontation began, Victoria looked genuinely frightened. Her business, her wealth, her entire identity was built around her success as an investment manager. If clients lost confidence in her judgment, the aircraft began its takeoff roll. The engines roared to life, pressing everyone back in their seats. Victoria gripped her armrests, suddenly very aware that her life was now literally in the hands of the man she had just spent 20 minutes disparaging. As the wheels left the ground, Jake spoke into his camera one more time. "We're airborne, folks. 110 people are now 30,000 feet in the air, trusting their lives to Captain Marcus Rivera, the pilot that one passenger claimed she didn't trust because of his race. Let's see how this plays out." But none of them knew that in exactly 2 hours and 28 minutes, Captain Rivera wouldn't just be proving his competence. He'd be performing a miracle, and Victoria Ashford would owe him her life. 1 hour into the flight, Victoria Ashford was beginning to relax, despite herself. The takeoff had been smooth. The aircraft was climbing steadily through clear blue skies, and Captain Rivera's flying was admittedly flawless. She had spent most of the first hour fielding increasingly frantic phone calls from her office. Her assistant Amanda was in full crisis management mode. "Victoria, the phones haven't stopped ringing." Amanda's voice was tight with stress through Victoria's wireless earbuds. "The Wall Street Journal wants a statement. CNBC is asking for an interview. And 3 of our biggest clients have called emergency meetings. Tell them I'm unavailable," Victoria said quietly, trying not to attract more attention from the other passengers. "I'll deal with this when I land. The board is meeting this afternoon. Emergency session. They want you there." Victoria's stomach dropped. An emergency board meeting was never good news. "What time?" 4 o'clock, Denver time. Victoria looked at her watch. If they landed on time, she could just make it. "Fine, set it up." She ended the call and tried to focus on her tablet, but concentration was impossible. Jake Morrison's live stream was still active, though he had shifted focus to showing the view outside and discussing the situation more generally. Still, every few minutes he'd pan the camera back toward her, reminding his now 150,000 viewers of her presence. Dr. Martinez had been fielding her own calls, reporters wanting medical expert commentary on stress and decision-making under pressure. She had declined all interviews, but she had been subtly observing Victoria throughout the flight. "You know," Dr. Martinez said quietly to Margaret Thompson, "I'm actually starting to feel sorry for her." She clearly didn't think through the consequences of speaking so publicly. Margaret shook her head. "Don't feel too sorry. She's a grown woman who made a choice to express racist opinions in public. Actions have consequences." In the cockpit, Captain Rivera was monitoring weather conditions ahead. Dark clouds were building over the Colorado Rockies, and Denver Air Traffic Control was reporting deteriorating conditions. "Dave, look at this radar," Marcus said, pointing to the weather display. "That storm system is moving faster than predicted." David Walsh studied the screen. "Looks like we might hit some moderate turbulence about an hour out from Denver. Maybe more than moderate. Those are some serious cells building up." Marcus keyed the radio. "Denver approach. American 447. Requesting updated weather at KDEI. American 447, Denver approach. Current conditions at Denver, winds 280 at 35, gusting to 45. Visibility 3 miles in heavy rain. Ceiling 800 overcast. Conditions deteriorating. Marcus frowned. Those were challenging conditions, but well within the aircraft's capabilities and his own experience level. Copy Denver. We'll monitor the situation. He clicked on the passenger address system. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. We're getting reports of some rough weather ahead as we approach the Denver area. Nothing dangerous, but we may experience some moderate to heavy turbulence in about an hour. I'm going to ask the flight attendants to secure the cabin a bit early, and I'd recommend everyone stay seated with their seatbelts fastened. Victoria looked up from her tablet with alarm. Weather problems were the last thing she needed today. 30 minutes later, the first signs of trouble appeared. The aircraft began to shake gently, then more vigorously. Outside the windows, dark clouds swirled ominously. Isabella Rodriguez and her crew moved efficiently through the cabin, securing loose items and checking that all passengers were seated with their belts fastened. "This is normal turbulence," Isabella announced. "Captain Rivera has everything under control." But in the cockpit, Marcus was becoming increasingly concerned. The weather radar was showing cells that hadn't been there 20 minutes ago. Massive thunderstorms with dangerous wind shear and severe turbulence. Denver approach American 447. We're seeing some significant weather development ahead. Requesting vectors around the worst of it. American 447 unable. All aircraft are experiencing the same conditions. The storm system has expanded faster than forecast. Be advised we're now issuing ground stops for all arrivals. Ground stops. David looked at Marcus with concern. Marcus keyed the radio again. Denver approach. What's our options for alternate airports? American 447 Colorado Springs is also below minimums. Cheyenne, Wyoming is reporting similar conditions. Your best bet is going to be to hold until this passes. How long until conditions improve? Unknown at this time. This system is moving differently than predicted. Marcus made a decision. Denver approach. American 447. Requesting hold at Yampa intersection. American 447 cleared to hold at Yampa as published. Expect further clearance in 1 hour. Marcus clicked off the radio and looked at David. An hour hold minimum. With this headwind, that's going to put us close to minimum fuel. How close? Marcus did quick calculations on his flight planning computer. Very close. He activated the passenger address system again. Folks, this is your captain with an update. Due to severe weather in the Denver area, air traffic control has put us into a holding pattern. We're going to circle for a while until conditions improve. This may add 30 to 60 minutes to our flight time, but everyone is safe and secure up here. Victoria's phone immediately started buzzing. Amanda again. Victoria, are you okay? I'm seeing weather reports from Denver. We're fine, Victoria said, though her voice was tighter than before. Just some weather delays. But 15 minutes later, the situation changed dramatically. The aircraft hit turbulence unlike anything most of the passengers had ever experienced. The plane dropped suddenly as if it had fallen into an invisible hole in the sky. Passengers screamed. Overhead bins popped open. Phones and tablets went flying. Victoria's tablet smashed against the window beside her. Her seatbelt cut into her waist as the aircraft bucked and rolled like a wild animal. Jesus Christ! Jake Morrison gasped, trying to keep his phone steady. His live stream viewers watched in horror as the cabin shook violently. In the cockpit, warning lights were flashing. The turbulence was severe enough to trigger multiple system alerts. Marcus, we've got hydraulic pressure warnings, David called out, his voice tight with concentration. Marcus scanned the instrument panel. Red lights were illuminating across multiple systems. Primary hydraulic system is failing. Backup system is fluctuating. The aircraft shuddered again, worse than before. This time, the turbulence was accompanied by a grinding noise from somewhere in the wings. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated with your seatbelts tightly fastened. Isabella's voice came over the intercom. Her training kept her voice steady, but passengers could hear the strain underneath. Marcus was working frantically now, running through emergency checklists with David. The hydraulic failure was serious. It controlled the aircraft's primary flight systems, including landing gear brakes and flight controls. "Dave, I need you to run the hydraulic failure checklist. Full emergency procedures." David's hands flew over the emergency handbook. Hydraulic failure checklist. Step 1, attempt to restore system pressure. Marcus worked the controls, trying to get pressure back into the hydraulic lines. Nothing. The gauges remained stubbornly in the red. Another massive jolt shook the aircraft. This time, passengers heard a loud bang from somewhere in the wing structure. Victoria was gripping her armrest so tightly her knuckles were white. For the first time in years, she felt completely powerless. All her money, all her influence, all her connections meant nothing at 37,000 feet in a damaged aircraft. Dr. Martinez was trying to help calm other passengers using her medical training to project confidence, even as her own heart raced. Everyone stay calm. Modern aircraft are designed to handle severe weather. The pilots know what they're doing. But privately, she was worried. This level of turbulence combined with what sounded like mechanical problems was far beyond normal weather difficulties. Marcus keyed the radio, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "Mayday, mayday, mayday. Denver approach American 447. We have multiple hydraulic failures and are experiencing severe turbulence. Requesting immediate clearance to nearest suitable airport." The word Mayday sent a chill through anyone listening to aviation radio frequencies. It was the international distress call reserved for life-threatening emergencies. American 447 Denver approach. Understand, you're declaring an emergency. Say souls on board and fuel remaining. American 447 115 souls on board, approximately 45 minutes, fuel remaining. 45 minutes. Victoria heard that number and felt her blood turn to ice. She didn't know much about aviation, but she knew that 45 minutes of fuel in an emergency was not a comfortable margin. David was still working through the emergency checklist. "Marcus, we've lost primary flight control hydraulics. We're down to manual reversion on most systems." Manual reversion meant Marcus would have to fly the aircraft using physical strength and mechanical backup systems with limited assistance from the computer-controlled flight management systems. It was like trying to drive a car after the power steering failed. Possible, but requiring enormous skill and physical effort. Denver approach, American 447. Be advised we need immediate vectors to the nearest airport with emergency services standing by. We have significant control difficulties. American 447 nearest suitable airport is Grand Junction Regional bearing 240 at 95 miles. Runway 29 is 10,000 feet. Emergency equipment is being notified. Grand Junction. Marcus knew the airport, a smaller regional facility but with a long runway and good emergency services. It would have to do. American 447 requesting direct Grand Junction, descending at pilot's discretion. American 447 cleared direct Grand Junction descend and maintain flight level 250 emergency frequency 121.5. Marcus began the descent fighting against controls that no longer responded normally. Every input required enormous physical effort. His military training was kicking in. He had dealt with combat damage to aircraft before, but never with over 100 civilian passengers depending on him. He clicked on the passenger address system. When he spoke, his voice was calm, professional, and completely in control. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We've experienced some mechanical difficulties related to the severe weather we've been encountering. As a precaution, we're going to be landing at Grand Junction Regional Airport in Colorado instead of Denver." Victoria felt tears spring to her eyes. The certainty, the professionalism in his voice. This was the man she had questioned, doubted, publicly humiliated. And now he was the only thing standing between her and disaster. I want everyone to listen carefully to the flight attendants who will be going through emergency landing procedures. This is purely precautionary, but we want everyone prepared. We'll be on the ground in approximately 30 minutes. Isabella and her crew began moving through the cabin with practiced efficiency, demonstrating emergency positions and checking that all passengers knew where their life vests were located. Jake Morrison was still live streaming, though his hands were shaking as he tried to hold the camera steady. His viewer count had exploded to over 300,000 as news of the emergency spread across social media. "This is unbelievable," he whispered into his camera. "The pilot that one passenger said she didn't trust because of his race is now trying to save all our lives. The irony is incredible." Dr. Martinez was moving through the cabin using her medical training to help calm frightened passengers. She stopped beside Victoria, who was crying silently, her earlier arrogance completely gone. "Are you okay?" Dr. Martinez asked quietly. Victoria looked up at her with red, tear-filled eyes. "I was wrong," she whispered. "I was so wrong about everything." Dr. Martinez sat down in the empty seat beside her. "Right now, that doesn't matter. Right now, we need to trust Captain Rivera to get us down safely. But I said those things about him. I questioned his ability. I was horrible." "Yes, you were?" Dr. Martinez said bluntly. "But that doesn't change his commitment to getting everyone home safely. That's what real professionals do." In the cockpit, Marcus was fighting the aircraft with every ounce of his skill and strength. The manual controls were heavy, unresponsive, requiring constant pressure and adjustment. Sweat was beading on his forehead despite the cool cockpit temperature. "Dave, I need you to calculate our approach speed with no hydraulic assistance. We're going to be coming in hot and heavy." David worked frantically with his flight computer. "Best estimate is 180 knots, about 30 knots faster than normal. We'll need every foot of that 10,000-foot runway." Marcus nodded grimly. A high-speed landing with limited control authority was dangerous under the best circumstances. With over 100 passengers on board, the margin for error was essentially zero. Grand Junction Tower. American 447 Heavy, 15 minutes out. Emergency approach, requesting fire and rescue equipment standing by. American 447 Grand Junction Tower. Emergency equipment is in position. Wind is 290 at 15 runway 29 is clear and waiting. You're cleared for straight-in approach runway 29. Marcus began lining up for the approach, every control input a struggle against the damaged systems. The aircraft was responding, but sluggishly requiring constant correction. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. We're beginning our approach now. Please ensure your seatbelts are tight seats and tray tables up, and listen carefully to the flight attendants." Victoria closed her eyes and, for the first time in years, found herself praying. She prayed for the skills of the pilot she had insulted. She prayed for forgiveness for her prejudice. She prayed for a second chance to be a better person. The aircraft descended through the clouds, Marcus fighting for every degree of control. Below them, Grand Junction Regional Airport waited with emergency vehicles lined up beside the runway, their red and blue lights flashing in the afternoon sun. In 10 minutes, everyone would know whether Captain Marcus Rivera's skills were truly as exceptional as his service record suggested. Victoria Ashford was about to get the most definitive answer to her questions about his qualifications. The approach to Grand Junction Regional Airport was a masterclass in aviation skill under pressure. Captain Marcus Rivera fought against unresponsive controls as he lined up the damaged aircraft with runway 29. Every input required enormous physical strength, and the aircraft responded like a wounded bird, sluggish and unpredictable. In the cabin, passengers were braced in emergency positions. Victoria Ashford sat rigid in her seat, tears streaming down her face as she watched the ground approach through her window. The irony was not lost on her. She was trusting her life completely to the man whose qualifications she had publicly questioned just 3 hours earlier. 500 feet, David Walsh called out from the co-pilot seat monitoring their descent. Airspeed 185 knots. Marcus adjusted the throttles with millimeter precision. Still too fast, but it's the best I can do with these controls. The runway appeared ahead, looking impossibly narrow from their current perspective. Red and blue emergency lights flashed along both sides as fire trucks and ambulances waited in position. 200 feet. 100. 50. The aircraft touched down hard, much harder than normal, but Marcus kept it straight and true down the center line. The landing gear absorbed the impact, and immediately he began the challenging process of stopping 11 tons of aircraft with limited braking assistance. "Thrust reversers deployed," David called out. "Brakes are sluggish but working." Marcus replied, his voice tight with concentration. The aircraft rolled down the 10,000-foot runway, bleeding off speed gradually. Marcus worked the rudder pedals and brake controls with every ounce of his remaining strength. Finally, mercifully, the aircraft came to a complete stop with over 2,000 feet of runway remaining. The cabin erupted in applause and cheers. Passengers were crying, laughing, hugging each other. They were alive, they were safe, and they all knew they had just witnessed an extraordinary demonstration of piloting skill. Jake Morrison's live stream had reached over 500,000 viewers. "We're down," he shouted into his camera. Captain Rivera just pulled off an incredible emergency landing. "This man is a hero." Marcus keyed the intercom one final time. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Grand Junction, Colorado. We're safe on the ground and emergency personnel are approaching the aircraft now as a precaution. Please remain seated until we give the all clear." His voice was steady, professional, and utterly exhausted. Victoria Ashford sat motionless in her seat, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had just happened. This man, this incredibly skilled, brave professional pilot, had just saved her life and the lives of everyone on board. And she had spent the first hour of the flight questioning whether he was competent because of his race. Emergency personnel surrounded the aircraft within minutes. Fire trucks, ambulances, and ground crew vehicles created a protective circle around the plane. The evacuation was orderly and calm, exactly what you'd expect from a crew that had just performed flawlessly under extreme pressure. As passengers filed off the aircraft, many stopped to shake hands with Captain Rivera, who stood in the cockpit doorway. Some were crying, others simply said thank you. A few asked for selfies, which Marcus politely declined. He was still in emergency mode, ensuring all passengers and crew were safely evacuated. Victoria was among the last to leave. She approached the cockpit door slowly, unsure of what to say. Marcus looked at her with no anger, no judgment, just the tired eyes of a man who had just performed one of the most challenging flights of his career. "Captain Rivera," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Ma'am," he replied evenly, "I owe you my life." Marcus nodded slightly. "I was just doing my job, ma'am. Same job I've been doing for 6 years without incident." The simple dignity of his response hit Victoria like a physical blow. "No recriminations. No, I told you so, just a quiet statement of fact." "I was wrong," she said, tears flowing freely now. "I was completely, horribly wrong about everything. Ma'am, right now, let's just focus on getting everyone taken care of. The rest can wait." But the rest couldn't wait. By the time Victoria walked into the Grand Junction terminal, her phone was buzzing with notifications. The story had exploded across every media platform. #Captain Rivera was trending worldwide, with millions of people sharing video clips of the emergency landing and Marcus's incredible skill. More importantly for Victoria, #Victoria Ashford was also trending, and the commentary was brutal. Her assistant Amanda called within minutes of Victoria reaching the terminal. "Victoria, where have you been? I've been trying to reach you for hours. We had an emergency landing. I'll explain later." "What's the damage?" Amanda's voice was strained. "It's bad. Really bad. The board voted." Victoria's heart stopped. "Voted on what they terminated you, effective immediately. Unanimous decision." Victoria sank into a plastic airport chair, the full weight of her situation finally hitting her. They can't do that. I built that company. They can and they did. Moral turpitude clause in your contract. They're saying your public statements constitute conduct detrimental to the company's reputation and client relationships. Victoria's hands were shaking. What about my clients? 3 of our biggest clients terminated their contracts this afternoon. That's 40% of our assets under management, Victoria. The company stock is down 32% since this morning. This is insane. It was just a private comment. Private, Victoria. It's been viewed by over 10 million people in the last 6 hours. CNN has been running the clips every 15 minutes. You're the lead story on every news website. Victoria looked around the small terminal. Other passengers from the flight were gathered in groups, many still talking excitedly about the emergency landing. Several were being interviewed by news crews who had somehow arrived already. Jake Morrison was holding court with a group of reporters, his phone still live-streaming. Captain Rivera saved all our lives today, and the woman who questioned his abilities based on his race owes him everything. Dr. Martinez was also being interviewed, providing expert medical commentary on stress and decision-making under pressure. What we witnessed today was extraordinary professionalism under extreme stress. Captain Rivera's performance was textbook perfect. Victoria realized with growing horror that she was now part of a story much bigger than her own prejudice. She had become the villain in a tale of heroism and redemption watched by millions of people around the world. Her phone buzzed with a text from her husband. Saw the news. Kids are asking questions. We need to talk. Then another from her sister Victoria. What the hell were you thinking? And another from her own mother. I raised you better than this. Within hours, Victoria Ashford had gone from successful CEO to international symbol of prejudice and privilege. The Internet's collective memory was long and unforgiving. Meanwhile, Captain Rivera was being interviewed by a CNN reporter outside the terminal building. Captain Rivera, can you walk us through what happened up there? Marcus was still in his uniform, though it was now wrinkled and sweat-stained from the emergency. We experienced multiple hydraulic system failures due to severe turbulence. The aircraft became difficult to control, so we declared an emergency and diverted to the nearest suitable airport. We understand there was an incident before takeoff involving a passenger questioning your qualifications. How does it feel to have saved the life of someone who doubted you? Marcus was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. My job is to safely transport every passenger regardless of their personal opinions about me. That's what I'm trained for, that's what I'm paid for, and that's what I did today. Do you have anything you'd like to say to that passenger? Marcus looked directly into the camera. I hope she's safe, and I hope she's learned something from this experience. We all have. The grace and professionalism of his response went viral immediately. Hashtag Class Act began trending alongside hashtag Captain Rivera. Back in the terminal, Victoria was fielding increasingly desperate phone calls. Her lawyer was calling about potential lawsuits. Her publicist was recommending immediate crisis management. Her accountant was warning about financial implications. But the call that hurt the most came from her 19-year-old daughter at college. Mom, everyone here has seen the videos. I'm so embarrassed. How could you say those things? Victoria couldn't answer. There was no answer that would make this better. Within 24 hours, the consequences were comprehensive and devastating. Ashford Capital Management lost 60% of its client base. Victoria's personal social media accounts were flooded with negative comments. Her membership at the country club was suspended pending review. Speaking engagements were canceled. Board positions were quietly revoked. But the most painful consequence was personal. Her husband filed for separation. Her children stopped returning her calls. Old friends distanced themselves publicly. Meanwhile, Captain Rivera was being celebrated as a hero. The airline promoted him to chief pilot for the Western region. Military veterans organizations honored him. Flight training schools invited him to speak about crisis management. Most importantly, his response to discrimination and his professional performance under pressure inspired thousands of young pilots, particularly minority pilots who had faced similar prejudice. The Federal Aviation Administration opened an investigation into Victoria's disruption of flight operations, which could result in criminal charges and a lifetime ban from commercial aviation. American Eagle Airlines implemented new policies for handling discriminatory passenger behavior training crew members to remove passengers who create hostile environments based on race or ethnicity. The pilots' union used Victoria's case as an example in their discrimination training, showing how prejudice can create safety hazards when passengers undermine crew authority based on personal bias. 3 months later, Victoria was working as a clerk in a real estate office, having lost everything she had built over 20 years. Her investment firm had been sold to competitors. Her personal assets were tied up in lawsuits. Her reputation was permanently destroyed. Marcus Rivera, meanwhile, had become a sought-after speaker on aviation safety and leadership under pressure. His emergency landing was featured in training videos. His calm response to discrimination was taught in customer service courses. The contrast couldn't have been starker. One person's prejudice had destroyed their own life while elevating the person they had tried to diminish. Victoria's last public statement was a written apology released through her attorney. "I take full responsibility for my words and actions. Captain Rivera is an exceptional pilot who saved my life and the lives of everyone on that aircraft. I was wrong, and I am deeply sorry for the pain my prejudice has caused. But by then, it was too late. In the age of social media, some mistakes echo forever." The story of Flight 447 became a case study in business schools about the cost of prejudice. It was featured in diversity training programs across multiple industries. It reminded everyone that character is revealed under pressure and that true professionals rise above personal attacks to serve something greater than themselves. Victoria Ashford learned the hardest lesson of all, that privilege without wisdom is just a longer fall from grace. 6 months after Flight 447's emergency landing, Marcus Rivera stood at the podium of the National Aviation Hall of Fame in Dayton, Ohio, accepting the Exceptional Service Award. The audience of pilots, air traffic controllers, and aviation professionals rose to their feet in sustained applause. Marcus looked out at the sea of faces, diverse, accomplished, unified in their respect for professional excellence. Among them sat his parents, his wife Maria, and their 2 young children. His father, the aircraft mechanic who had faced his own share of discrimination, wiped tears from his eyes. 6 months ago, Marcus began, his voice carrying easily through the auditorium. "I was just doing my job, flying passengers safely from one destination to another. That's all any of us in this room want to do. Serve the traveling public with skill, professionalism, and safety." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "But sometimes our profession asks more of us. Sometimes we face challenges that test not just our technical skills, but our character. On that day over Colorado, I wasn't just fighting hydraulic failures and severe weather. I was proving that competence has no color, that skill recognizes no boundaries of race or background." The applause was immediate and heartfelt. I want to thank my crew that day. David Walsh, Isabella Rodriguez, and the entire cabin crew who kept passengers calm while I focused on flying. I want to thank the passengers who supported me when support was needed most. And yes, I even want to thank the passenger who questioned my qualifications, because her words reminded me why I became a pilot in the first place. Marcus's promotion to regional chief pilot had come with new responsibilities. He now oversaw training programs for new pilots with special emphasis on emergency procedures and customer service under pressure. But more importantly, he had become a mentor for minority pilots facing their own challenges in the industry. The Marcus Rivera Aviation Academy had graduated its first class of diverse pilots just 3 weeks earlier. Funded partly by donations from people inspired by his story, the Academy focused on providing flight training opportunities for underrepresented communities. Every time a young person of color sees someone who looks like them in this cockpit, Marcus continued, it expands their vision of what's possible. That's worth more than any individual recognition. Among the audience sat Dr. Sarah Martinez, the surgeon from Flight 447. She had become a close friend of Marcus's family and served on the board of his aviation academy. Next to her sat Jake Morrison, whose live stream had captured the entire incident and whose subsequent documentary about the flight had won several journalism awards. Margaret Thompson, the retired teacher, had started a scholarship fund for aviation maintenance training in Marcus's honor. Even at 71, she was determined to create opportunities for young people to enter aviation careers. But one face was notably absent from the ceremony. Victoria Ashford sat in her small one-bedroom apartment in Phoenix, watching the award ceremony on C-SPAN. She had moved there 6 months earlier after her divorce was finalized and her assets were liquidated to pay various settlements and legal fees. The woman who had once managed $200 million in investments now worked as a customer service representative for a regional bank making $32,000 a year. Her elegant designer wardrobe had been replaced by simple business attire from discount stores. The Mercedes was gone, replaced by a used Honda Civic. But the most profound change wasn't financial. It was internal. Victoria had spent the last 6 months in intensive therapy trying to understand how someone who considered herself intelligent and successful could harbor such deep-seated prejudices. The work was painful, forcing her to confront assumptions she had never questioned. Dr. Patricia Williams, her therapist, was a black woman, something Victoria had specifically requested. "If I'm going to change," Victoria had said during their first session, "I need to face my biases directly." The therapy sessions had been brutal. Victoria learned about the history of discrimination in aviation, about the obstacles that pilots like Marcus had overcome, about her own role in perpetuating harmful stereotypes. She learned about the Tuskegee Airmen, the black pilots who had proved their excellence during World War II, despite facing prejudice from their own military. She learned about the barriers that still existed for minority pilots, the subtle biases that questioned their competence, the extra scrutiny they faced. Most painfully, she learned about the impact of her words. Letters from young black pilots who had heard her comments describing how her prejudice had echoed the doubts they faced daily. Parents who had to explain to their children why someone would question a pilot's ability based on race. Victoria had tried to reach out to Marcus several times through intermediaries, seeking a chance to apologize in person. Each time his response had been polite but firm, he had moved on, and she should focus on her own growth rather than seeking his forgiveness. It was a lesson in itself. True redemption, she was learning, wasn't about being forgiven by those you had wronged. It was about becoming someone who would never wrong others in the same way again. Her children had slowly begun speaking to her again, but the relationships were forever changed. Her daughter Ashley, now a sophomore at Northwestern, had switched her major to social justice studies, partly inspired by her mother's fall from grace. "I want to understand how people become prejudiced," Ashley had told her during a difficult phone conversation. "So I can help prevent it." Victoria's son Michael had joined the Big Brothers Big Sisters program mentoring young black students interested in business careers. "I figure I need to do something positive to balance out what our family name represents. Now," he had explained. The ripple effects of Victoria's prejudice extended far beyond her own consequences. The incident had sparked widespread discussions about discrimination in travel, leading to new policies at airlines, hotels, and rental car companies. Training programs now included specific scenarios about handling passenger bias. Law schools added Flight 447 to their curriculum as a case study in the intersection of civil rights and commercial law. Business schools used Victoria's downfall as an example of how personal character flaws could destroy professional success. Most importantly, Marcus's response had become a template for handling discrimination with dignity and professionalism. His calm competence under pressure inspired not just pilots but professionals in every field who faced bias based on their race, gender, or background. As the award ceremony concluded, Marcus was approached by a young Latina pilot named Sofia Guerrero. She was 26, just graduated from flight school, and about to start her career with a regional airline. "Captain Rivera," she said nervously, "I wanted to thank you, not just for what you did that day, but for how you handled everything afterward. I start flying next month, and I know I'll face some of the same challenges you have." Marcus smiled and shook her hand. "Just remember, let your skills speak louder than their ignorance. Focus on being the best pilot you can be, and the rest will take care of itself." 600 miles away, Victoria turned off the television and sat in the quiet of her small apartment. On her coffee table was a letter she had been writing and rewriting for weeks. Not to Marcus. She had learned that seeking his forgiveness was selfish, but to young pilots who might face similar discrimination. The letter would be published in Aviation Today magazine the following month. In it, Victoria detailed her transformation, acknowledged the full scope of her prejudice, and urged readers to examine their own biases before they caused harm to others. "I thought I was a good person who had made an unfortunate comment," she wrote. "I learned that good people don't make racist comments. They don't harbor prejudices. They don't assume incompetence based on appearance. I spent 45 years building successful businesses while remaining ignorant about my own bigotry. Don't make the same mistake." The letter would generate thousands of responses. Some would be critical, unforgiving of her past actions, but others would be from people who recognized their own prejudices and committed to change. Marcus Rivera never read the letter. He was too busy building the future, training new pilots, advocating for diversity in aviation, and proving every day that excellence truly has no color. His children would grow up in a world where their father was a hero, where character mattered more than appearance, where skill and integrity were the measures of worth. Victoria Ashford's children would grow up understanding the cost of prejudice, committed to building bridges rather than walls. Both legacies, in their own way, would make the world better. The story of Flight 447 became more than just a tale of emergency aviation. It became a reminder that our choices define us, that character is tested under pressure, and that redemption is possible, but only through genuine change, not just regret. And somewhere in the sky, every day, pilots of every background safely transport millions of passengers, their competence measured not by their appearance, but by their skill training and commitment to excellence, just as it should be. After spending months researching this story, interviewing witnesses, and tracking the long-term consequences of that fateful flight, I'm left with profound thoughts about human nature, prejudice, and the power of character under pressure. What strikes me most about Captain Marcus Rivera is not just his technical skill, though his emergency landing was absolutely masterful, but his response to being challenged. He could have been angry. He could have been defensive. He could have let Victoria's prejudice affect his professionalism. Instead, he did his job with quiet dignity and saved the life of the woman who had publicly disrespected him. That's not just good flying. That's exceptional character. Victoria Ashford's story is more complex. Yes, her prejudice was appalling. Yes, her public statements were harmful and wrong. But her complete downfall also serves as a cautionary tale about the speed with which our digital age can destroy a life built over decades. In just a few hours, one moment of revealed character cost her everything: her career, her wealth, her family relationships, her reputation. Some people say her punishment was too severe. I disagree. When you're in a position of power, managing millions of dollars, making decisions that affect people's livelihoods, your character matters enormously. Victoria's prejudice wasn't just personal bias. It reflected a fundamental flaw in judgment that called into question every business decision she had ever made. Here's what I learned from this story. Character is revealed, not created under pressure. Marcus didn't become a hero during that emergency landing. He revealed who he had always been: competent, professional, committed to service above self. Victoria didn't become prejudiced when she spoke those words. She revealed biases that had been shaping her thinking for years. Excellence speaks louder than ignorance, but only if you let it. Marcus could have spent energy fighting Victoria's accusations. Instead, he focused on being the exceptional pilot he had trained to become. His skills, not his words, proved her wrong. Privilege without wisdom is dangerous. Victoria thought her wealth and status protected her from consequences. She learned that in the age of social media, nobody is insulated from the results of their choices. Character matters more than bank accounts. True professionals serve everyone, even those who don't respect them. Marcus didn't save Victoria's life despite her prejudice. He saved it because of his professionalism. That's what separates real leaders from pretenders. Change is possible, but redemption is not owed. Victoria's therapy and apparent transformation are meaningful, but they don't erase the harm her words caused. Sometimes the best apology is becoming someone who would never commit the same offense again. The most important lesson for me personally is about examining our own biases. It's easy to condemn Victoria's blatant prejudice, but how many of us carry subtler assumptions about people based on their appearance, accent, or background? How many times do we make snap judgments about competence based on irrelevant characteristics? I think about the young pilots, especially pilots of color, who watched this story unfold. Some probably saw themselves in Marcus, inspired by his professionalism under attack. Others might have seen their own fears reflected in the prejudice he faced. Both reactions are valid, and both point to how much work we still have to do. This story went viral not just because of the dramatic emergency landing, but because it touched on universal themes: fairness, respect, and the courage to stand up for what's right. In a world that often feels divided, Marcus Rivera showed us what unity looks like, treating everyone with equal professionalism regardless of how they treat you. So here's my challenge to everyone watching. Look at your own assumptions. When you see someone in a position of authority or expertise, what thoughts go through your mind? Are you judging their competence based on relevant qualifications, or are you influenced by irrelevant characteristics? The next time you encounter excellent service from someone who doesn't look like you, take a moment to appreciate their skill. The next time you hear someone express prejudice like Victoria did, have the courage to speak up like Dr. Martinez did. And if you're in a position like Marcus was, facing unfair scrutiny based on your background, remember his example. Let your excellence speak for itself. Stay professional even when others abandon professionalism. Focus on serving others rather than defending yourself. The skies are safer because of pilots like Marcus Rivera. Our communities are better when we choose character over prejudice. And our children deserve to inherit a world where competence is measured by merit, not appearance. What do you think? Have you ever witnessed discrimination that backfired on the perpetrator? Have you seen examples of professionals maintaining dignity under unfair attack? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story moved you, please share it. Not for likes or subscribes, but because these lessons matter. Because excellence deserves recognition. Because the next person facing unfair prejudice needs to know they're not alone. Until next time, remember, we're all passengers on this journey together. Let's make sure we're judging our pilots and everyone else by the content of their character and the quality of their work. Stay curious, stay humble, and never underestimate the power of treating people with the respect they earn through their actions, not the assumptions we make from their appearance.